Welcome back. This is Daybreak, and thanks for staying with us. Grace Wangeshi is the Executive Director, the Independent Medical and Legal Unit, IMLU. Cornelius Oduor is the Deputy Executive Director, the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Demas Kiprono equally holds the same position at ICJ Kenya, and Suba Churchill is the Executive Director, the Kenya National Civil Society Center, joining us from the county of Homa Bay this morning. Suba, to you. You had a point. Please proceed. Yes, we seem to be having challenges getting to Suba. Yes, coming back here, Cornelius, Grace pointed out the fundamentally lacking ingredients in fixing some of these problems, and certainly not the rapprochement between the president and the former prime minister, is it?
I think we clearly pointed that our institutions have also failed us big time. Politics aside, you see, institutions are as good as the people who are holding those offices. And to the extent that after every election, the president establishes the executive, we have the judiciary, and we also have parliament. Why are these institutions not functioning? Is it that they don't have adequate resources? Or is it that they are not lacking in leadership that can deliver the mandates of those institutions? It's both. I think as a country, we are still suffering from this hangover of the imperial presidency. There's a lot of weight attached to the president as a person and the office of the president. Today, you still see governors trying to impress the president. They are flocking to the office of the president to try and solicit for good development, our members of parliament, as if there are no budget allocations for them to oversee implementation or delivery of services to Mwananchi. So I think Parliament needs to play its role, ensure that institutions are given adequate resources. Institutions that do not perform are also reprimanded and denied resources so that we can get some kind of performance-based management of public service. We need to ensure that those who are not performing are brought to Parliament and questioned adequately. But a situation whereby Parliament has abrogated responsibility and singing the praise for the presidency all the time, there's also a growing trend of Parliament now even starting to question in the reports from the Auditor General, the control of budget. So I think by and large, these institutions have evolved in a culture that cannot guarantee effective governance or good governance in this country. It goes back to the people who are sovereign. We must exercise our sovereign or our political right to vote in the right people. Otherwise, these governance problems emanate from the lack of seriousness by Kenyan voters to put in serious people in office.
So either parties cannot be absolved from our problems. The donator of the power and those who exercise power on behalf of the people, is it? They are
equally to blame. But more importantly, you see, when the president took the oath of office, they took an oath to defend the Constitution. What are we seeing? How many cases has this government lost in court by trying to push through very unpopular, discriminatory policies? Why are they not learning? It's 2.5 years since this regime came to power. It cannot be they are still planning, they are still allocating. We must be able now to see some of the immediate results of this administration. So I think as much as citizens are to partly blame for the kind of choices they make during the ballot, those who are in office currently, whom we've donated our sovereign authority to preside over the management of public affairs, are largely also to blame. Because what reasons can they give us for not delivering?
Okay. And Demas, then, what then happens to the families of whose kin still missing? Ideally, in a setup like ours, where democratic ideals ought to be adhered to, it's unfathomable. We have missing kin, families are unable to trace them. The government isn't providing the sufficient answers required. So what happens? I mean, where does the conversation move from here?
So we have certain legal tools that are even trying. I mean, civil society, for example, the Law Society is trying to use certain tools that are provisions under the Constitution. One of them is the writ of habeas corpus, produce the body dead or alive, which you have seen being used as a strategy by certain organizations to try to compel the state to produce individuals believed to have been disappeared or arrested. And this is not usually very forthcoming because, as you've seen before, the state has been able to say that we don't know where these people are. We have the National Commission on Human Rights, which is an organization that's supposed to promote and protect human rights. It has done a stellar job in terms of writing reports, supporting victims, supporting civil society as they advocate for a more human rights compliant country. However, as Wangeshi had said earlier, there is a big problem in terms of funding. So as we speak, the National Commission on Human Rights does not have the funds to be able to get out and do investigations. But that is one of their core mandates. Anywhere in Kenya, if something happens, they should be able to wake up and go there. They have the right to enter certain government bodies. They have the right to enter into police premises and so on and so forth. But you see, this is not forthcoming. To go back to the discussions you had said about, for example, Parliament. Why is Parliament not acting as the oversight body that it's supposed to be? It goes back to these systemic problems that we've been talking about. So Parliament is supposed to be this independent body that is supposed to oversight. However, MPs every year get 110 million or north of that to implement CDF. So the reality is that our MPs are busy with the CDF, are not busy oversighting. And now we are in a precarious situation where the courts have said the CDF is illegal, it is unconstitutional. And so this is the best time for the government to dangle a carrot and say, by the way, if you don't support these tax measures, if you don't do X and Y, you will not get this amount of money. And so we have a situation where our institutions are split in terms of attention. They are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. They're implementing a fund. We have a judiciary that has tried its best to be the voice of the people, to be a guardrail against executive and parliamentary excesses. We have seen many court orders trying to affirm the Constitution. However, the judiciary can go only a certain distance because, as we speak today, the judiciary is not adequately funded. In other countries, the judiciary is supposed to take about 3% of their annual revenue. We are at below 1%. And this was further hit by the budget cuts that happened last year after the Gen Z uprising. And so we find that we are getting into a more precarious situation where we are not resourcing the institutions that we're supposed to resource.
And Wangeshi, what does this portend then? What does this financial suffocation portend for the performance of the institutions that are ideally created as a stopgap measure to check on excesses by the state?
If, for example, you look at the provisions of the National Coroner Services Act 2017, it provides for the establishment of the Coroner General's Office, which to date has never been functional. Why? Stifling of finances and not ensuring that policies and the legislative framework is implemented. So obviously, you can see a direct connection there. If you do not finance and then ensure that the right people are in those offices to deliver on their mandate, if you do not ensure independence of those offices, and we are emphasizing independence of those offices because we have seen a lot of interference. We have seen a lot of instructions coming from the executive to these independent offices, and therefore they are not able to function, and therefore nothing will ever change. So, for example, if the Coroner General's office was in place, we would be able to investigate and report on all these deaths, the extrajudicial killings. But right now, it's not being done because that office is not functional, and it has been left to the civil society organizations to fill in a gap that really is not our gap. We are not the duty bearer. The duty bearer is the government, and they should be able to deliver. One of the things that we really want to push for with immediate, that should be of immediate attention, is the establishment of a missing persons data bank. It doesn't exist. Civil society has a data bank of persons that are missing. The government, number one, played and denied that even people are missing until September last year, if you remember. Had there been a proper system to document, to monitor, to report, and take action, we probably would be having a very few people still missing. But again, the responsibility and the mandate of the institutions that have been set in place is just not again being delivered. So no one thinks about the plight of the kin that you asked about.
Okay.
People have no closure to date. They don't know whether their kin are alive or dead. They don't know, there's been no support towards medical, psychological, and even legal rehabilitation of those survivors. Again, this has come back to civil society that tries to fit in the shoes to ensure medical provision for survivors, medical, psychosocial support for kin, you know, and it's really difficult. And so what we are saying is, as long as there's no independence, as long as there is interference, as long as you curtail financing of these institutions, then we will retain a status quo that benefits the political class.
Yeah. And Cornelius, then, is this not a danger for our democracy, given that all of you are describing a designed, deliberate attempt to make sure that institutions do not perform and also hinder them from getting the answers from the authorities that ought to be answerable to the Kenyan people?
It's a very dangerous trend. Because if you ask me, why is the police not able to date to prosecute even a single case? Because when the Gen Z happened, we were treated to very live pictures and even live images, and we could see that there was excessive use of police force. Why is it that up to date, despite almost losing 67 Kenyans, there's no single case that has been successfully been prosecuted? It only points to a capture by a state of these institutions. The police has everything, but the problem is that they only go where they have been directed, probably, to say so. Why are they not taking up these cases? All these families of the 67 people who died are still waiting for answers, almost 1 year down the line. It only tells you that there's a lot of political interference in the workings of the police. And this goes against the very promise that President Ruto did provide, that they are not going to criminalize the security system. They are going to accord them the space to do their work independently. But what we are seeing is the opposite. So this trend of institutions, state capture by institutions, is a dangerous threat to democratic governance in Kenya. Yeah. And I think it must start by having a resolve that we are going to allow the institutions to operate within the confines of the Constitution.
Yeah. So all this, what does it then tell us about the moral fabric of society? Because the president pledged to end all this, having been, according to him, a victim in the run-up to the elections. Parliament never followed up on the same. Still, there is silence across board on who should take up responsibility. Then what does it reflect of us as a society, as a community?
I think we have allowed this to happen because of the misconception that when we are in government, people have been treated with this idea that we are in government to support governments blindly, thinking that this notion that being in government is good. Everybody has a stake in government. We are sovereign. We have only given this power to the parliament to the executive, the judiciary. But to the extent that we are comfortable with what is happening, because I don't see people demonstrating that they are really affected by the situation as it obtains currently. I think it points to a political culture that has evolved over years in this country. And I think it's high time people go back to our senses and ensure that we are able to come out, because civilian oversight is equally important. It's provided for in the Constitution in Article 1. If Parliament has failed, then it's behoves the citizens now to come out in the large number and say no to this kind of governance, bad governance that we see residing. And it must be exercised even at the very, very low level, not only at the presidency, but even starting from the even MCAs, our members of parliament, and governors. We can't have a situation whereby there's plunder of public resources and people are just clapping, people are paid, people are manipulated. There must reach a point where you say no to this bad government.
Demas, I'm looking at the 10-point plan by the president and the former prime minister. We'll come to the others, but point number 10 states this was meant to protect sovereignty of the people, stop abductions, respect constitutionalism and the rule of law, and respect press freedom. It also mentions right to peaceful assembly, compensation of all pending claims of right victims. We never needed the president and Odinga to come together to address these issues, is it?
No, we did not. However, they decided to. And we are seeing a replication of this. So Kenya is one unique country because let's take policing, for example. So we have the Philip Waki report, Philip Alston report, Philip Ransley report. Yes. Almost a decade later, we decide, oh, we want to do police reforms again. We have the Maraga report. And if you look at the thread of all this, is that what we need is accountability. Superior and command responsibility, and also dignity for police officers. Where are we in terms of police reforms as we speak right now? Research shows that policing only succeeds when the community is involved, so community policing and intelligence-based policing that is democratic. You understand? That is not the policing that we are seeing. What we are seeing is a continuation of regime policing, where the police are there to prop up and protect the political class and actually the regime that is in power at that time. And so, incidentally, you see the same symptoms come to bear no matter who is at the seat. And so how do the sovereign now ensure that we take back policing as it's supposed to be? If you look at the 10-point plan, and you look at what the handshake was supposed to do during Raila and Uhuru's time, and you look at the National Accord, what it was supposed to do when Kenya was at the brink of precipice, it is identical. What we need is fidelity to the Constitution, respect of separation of powers, and a country that is ingrained in equality and the rule of law. That is not what we see. What we see is weaponization of the state. What we see is the state being a tool for becoming rich, without accountability.
And the ICJ is part of the police working group.
Yes.
Police reforms working group.
Yes, we are.
What are the specific pointers that you can flesh out from some of these reports that, including the last one by the Maraga task force, the one that we had in the aftermath of the post-election violence? All these seem to be not adding value to the sanctity of the human life in Kenya.
Yes. Actually, let's just go back a little. Since 2010, we have seen successful prosecutions of some officers who have been implicated in murder or torture of persons. And there are many more cases going on in court. I think the last time I checked, there were about 300 going on in court right now. And so there you see a slight change towards accountability. But then you go back to issues of command and superior responsibility. Right now, there is a case in court on Baby Pendo about the atrocities that happened in 2017. And what the ODPP is trying to invoke at that, in that case is issues of the international crimes. But now going for the officers who have command responsibility.
Okay.
This is, if that case is successful, it will create a new avenue for accountability, because for so long we've been relying on the normal criminal standards of proving that a police officer is wrong. However, if we go to command responsibilities, then we are trying to say that the Inspector General is responsible for his officers, that the commander in a precinct is a precinct, a police precinct, is responsible for what the officers are doing down there.
Okay.
That is something that I think, as the Police Reform Working Group, we're very keen on, because the patterns are that certain areas during highly charged political times are criminalized.
Okay.
And then the police are poured into that area and they commit atrocities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Grace, among the other issues also you outlined include corruption. And there's a great concern at both levels of government. And still, on accountability, all the reports by the Auditor General and the Controller of Budgets appeared not to be acted upon. I mean, it seems it's a case of double tragedy for the Kenyan people.
Absolutely. You know, when we talk of corruption and the way things have become in this country, again, first and foremost, the Whistleblower Police Act is not in place, and we need the protection of persons who come in to report cases. But what we have seen is open, excessive use of public funds without care, without, you know, even respect. And at times we talk about integrity, and I ask myself, what actually is the definition of integrity if we see that Kenyans are dying because they cannot put food on the table, but politicians are flying in left and right and center and tripling costs of services that we know, you know, the SGR, for example, all this, the Andani story. But the leaders still, even when called out, will not back down and do the right thing. If only we began telling ourselves, let's just do that which is right, it would change the story of this country. But let me just give you two quick examples of what we define as patriotism. One, if you look at what happened with the Butere girls, and I'm bringing in this to answer the question of corruption in a different way. When the Butere girls went onto stage, sang the national anthem and left, that was a very powerful message that they passed. And that is what patriotism is. That we will not be cowed, but will not be pushed to do that which is not right. We will not perform in an empty theater. That is not what we came to do. Okay. Now, when we witness corruption as Kenyans, we do not report it. And I do respect the fact that there's a lot of intimidation, a lot of people are being disappeared because of witnessing crime and reporting some of these things. But we must come back and say we have to begin doing that which is right. This is how the Andani deal came up, because somebody reported it. But we also need to protect the people that come up to report these cases. So that is one thing. If you look at, and now this is corruption in another way, if you look at the nominations of the CS for gender last week, but one, and here is somebody who is saying, oh, femicide is as a result of, you know, girls wanting to live a lavish life and all that, and they are called out. But a committee will still pass on that name. Why are they passing on that name? Any connection with anything?
So you're talking about the vetting committee?
The vetting committee,
okay.
Yeah. So my point is, corruption has been so ingrained even in our thinking, such that we no longer do that which is right and which is expected of us, because you want to be in the right books, because you want to be recognized, and Odwal spoke about that. You want to be in the right books with the political class. And so this issue of not taking action, not holding leaders to account on corruption, we haven't seen those cases getting prosecuted, even when there's evidence that has been put up. And so you wonder, how then do we change? How do we get ourselves out of this? Simple things like, the Traffic Act, for example, bribing on the roads, and the police officers asking for money up front. I mean, it's become so obvious that it's almost being defined as the way that Kenyans behave. And so we have to have independence of the investigating offices to even investigate the political leaders and take action.
All right. And then, Cornelius, here comes another fundamental point, which is clearly not adhered to or not observed. It's what was pointed out in the 10-point agenda, or the 10-point areas highlighted by both teams from the president and the former prime minister. The place of freedom of expression, which is granted by the Constitution, which ought not to be dictated by the two parties, is it?
Definitely. This sometimes just a lip service to Kenyans. The 10-point agenda looks okay, but who has the political will to implement it? Because what is said and the actions that follow tells you that there was no commitment or seriousness in some of these things. I think the last 1 year, we've seen the muzzling of the civic space, using the security agencies, especially the police. None other the media has been under constant attack. I think the most recent case is the Nakuru Butere Girls drama festival, whatever it was. And we could see police using excessive force. Very early in the morning, they are trying to arrest Malala, and they are pouring tear gas at journalists, and this kind of things. So I think the intention of some of these political MOUs and coming together is just to woodwink Kenyans. But the political culture has not changed. If I go back to the question of corruption, must America intervene for Kenyan government to understand that the Adani deal was not okay? Must people go to court? How many government officers, the president himself, or even the opposition leader, Raila, defended Adani? Up to that point where now it became obvious that this deal was not okay. So it tells you that if you don't deal with this collusion and the interest by public servants to enhance or to create wealth, illegal wealth, by using their offices illegally, corruption is going to be here with us. We must deal with the issue of our politics. We must fix our politics if we are to deal with corruption. Because in this era of public-private partnership, we are also seeing a new way in which Kenyans are being deceived, and we end up losing a lot of money. So everything must be put in the open. How many times have this government denied some of the things that have later come out to be, we have come to know that there was no goodwill on the part of government in terms of dealing with the private sector. So I think we must fix our politics. Our leaders must be honest. They cannot go cutting deals outside this country, getting us to get loans that are then stolen, and then now we are forced to painfully pay for these loans, and there's no service rendered. We are now paying heavily for the SGR, but there's no service.
Nandemas, doesn't this then blow the cover again upon? Because it again, this dovetails the place of institutions, and that's why they work properly in democratic setups like ours. For instance, were you amused, as Kenyans were, when members of parliament gave the president a standing ovation when he terminated the Adani contract and the deals with the Ketrako, and which the other one which is supposed to have undertaken the renovation of the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport, when yet this is the house that ought to have looked into this matter critically and guide the Kenyan people on what next?
Yes, it is indeed a quagmire, because the person who's supposed to do oversight is the person clapping after they failed to do the oversight, and now is clapping for the executive in which they're supposed to oversight. You see, that is a problem in itself. But I think we also need to, at the end of the day, look into campaign financing in this country, because it is one of the causes of all these issues. The way our politics is oriented is that persons need money to be able to unduly and illegally influence the voter. And so the preoccupation of leaders when they get into power, from the county level to the national level, is getting funds for the next election. And so right now we do not have laws that regulate the amount of money that can go around our political ecosystem. And this is how you see persons being told to queue in a stadium and are each given 2,000 shillings or 1,000 shillings or 500 shillings. Where did that person get that money? You understand? We are not asking those basic questions. And until we can answer those questions is when we will now have a true architecture of our politics, where we choose leaders as per their competencies and their willingness to work for the people. A person who made you queue and gave you 2,000 shillings, each person, is not going to work for you when they get into power. They are going to ensure that they have enough for the next time around. Yeah. That is a basic thing that we need to look at in terms of our political hygiene, which is not there.
But,
yes, Cornelius.
But Abdi, we must also question the place of political parties in our governance here. Because we can't have a situation whereby Parliament has become a choir and the choir master is the president. And that's why they can afford to take a political stand on an issue and change their stand almost immediately when the president changes his position on this matter. I think we have a problem even right in how the architecture of our political parties and whether they really stand for public good or they are just vehicles that are used by influential individuals to advance their personal agenda. I think we must find a way where political parties really become the pillars of our democratic governance. Because what we've seen over the years, most of these political parties have just remained campaign vehicles, and that's why they hardly survive their 5th birthday. I can tell you the president will be buying on a different political party in 2027, because this one now is no longer sellable probably in some parts of the country. So we must deal with how political parties are formed, how they are funded, and how they are run. And if they remain personal vehicles for people to advance their personal political agendas, then our democracy will continuously suffer.
And Grace, do we miss the point that the presidency under the current dispensation is not an almighty president? He's subject to checks and balances, is he?
That's what we've missed. Actually, the question you asked about the clap, we need to ask ourselves, what is the significance of that clap? Because that clap now is the one that demonstrates the lack of integrity on the people clapping, because they did not even question, but they are aligning to the presidency. So the presidency, and actually not the office, but the person has become the determinant of Kenya's democracy. And that's very sad. It's really sad that the whole system is dependent on the direction the executive leads. And even when there are obvious issues that we have around democracy, around governance, about human rights, you cannot question. So that really worries us. And the question we spoke about the independence of these offices and of these people, if you look at CSs, parliamentarians, all of them, especially parliamentarians, elected through the goodwill of the people so that they can legislate and ensure that Kenya moves forward, but lose their independence and the moral compass the minute they get into parliament. And they become hoodwinked to pleasing a presidency. I'm telling you, we've completely lost it as Kenyans. And that's why I keep insisting, and I'll repeat it again, the power is in our hands as Kenyans to get the right people into parliament and to the offices. People that can be held to account for every action either they take or omission in regards to safeguarding the Constitution. It has to come to that individual responsibility, and we have to get it done.
Okay, and then I was talking about the governance structure. Then one factor that we can't do away from this discussion is the question of also our counties, because much of the power has been devolved. And we have the county assemblies, more or less these small parliaments, to keep also the executives at the county level in check. Is that properly done? Are the people in the respective 47 counties aware of or knowledgeable of the governance space in their respective counties?
I'd say yes and no. The people are aware that power and resources have been brought closer to them. However, what we've seen is a replication of our national ills into the county space, where MCAs are busy chasing for per diems, chasing for trips, where we see people in counties going to benchmark on issues that they will never produce in their county. It's just a trip that they wanted to take to get per diems, to get money. And if they do not do that, they will make the life of the government, of the governor, hell. Okay. One of the counties that were hailed during the last 2 terms was Makueni, in terms of its performance under Kivutha Kibwana. But then you realize the first term, they almost did nothing because the MCAs tried all that they could do to ensure that he was not able to work. And it reached a point where he had to write to the President Uhuru Kenyatta, asking for the county to be basically dissolved. And that is when things began changing, because they realized that he's not going to flinch. And in the coming elections, almost all MCAs were sent home. And that is when we started seeing the service delivery coming to the people. But you can count these visionary governors by one hand. In most cases, you find that there's a lot of pillaging happening in our counties. Mm-hmm. And it is so shameful because there are certain bare minimums that a county can provide for its people. For example, healthcare. You've seen an unwillingness to hire doctors, a diversion of funds meant for healthcare to other things. And all these are abated and supported by MCAs. And so the problems that we talk about in terms of oversight at the national level are replicated at the county level, including the blatant corruption. And you've seen that there have been cases against governors that are in the pipeline right now.
And the end game, Grace, does it then, is the end game commensurate with the billions looted from the public coffers here? Because you realize some of these cases end up with no successful convictions, yet this money left the public coffers. I mean, where still there is a problem with healthcare, education, and the state of our infrastructure. We have a lot to sort out, is it, for our governance to function properly as it is required? We have a lot to work on. In fact, the conversation now is that it looks like we have also devolved corruption, so to speak, because the counties are extremely corrupt in the way they do things. But good question, and I wish we just did 2 key things. One, put in the money in key priority areas. But right now people are thinking of how much more can I steal? How do I steal more than the other person? And so we keep looting and making ourselves rich, yet health is on the decline. Kenyans cannot access health services. They are dying on hospital corridors. They are dying, in whichever space. Our children, the education system is failing. And so if we just prioritized and decided to ensure that our key sectors, our key sectors are functional, that would make a very big difference. Number 2, fund the institutions that are meant to oversight and hold your
the executive to account and just, remove yourself from the space. It's not about you, it's about Kenyans. Thirdly, services for Kenyans. Look at Victims Protection Fund. It's not functional. Victims of torture. I mentioned earlier that there are no services for survivors. Look at the Restorative Fund for survivors, post-election violence. If you sit and listen to survivors, if you look at the lives they're leading now, I have been in communication a lot of times with people who are nursing injuries, people with bullet wounds out of a torture incident, survivors of post-election violence 0708, 2017, living with deep trauma and deep pain. There has been absolutely zero support from government. Even the case that was determined that there should be compensation for 4 victims, they have never been paid, they have never been compensated. So reprioritizing and asking ourselves, can we do the right things for Kenyans? Can we look at this Kenyan woman who wakes up very early to go to the market to sell her goods and still sleeps hungry because she's not able to feed her children? Okay. We have to go back to the basics. We really must.
Okay. Yeah. And Cornelius, I'll come to one final aspect is also to look at the rule of law and the respect for the same, which continuously has been lacking. Ideally, this constitution creates a degree of irritation amongst the political leaders. Is that equally a contributory factor to some of the problems that bedevil our governance space, the fact that there's no respect for the rule of law and constitutionalism?
Definitely, because when you look at the issue of the rule of law, there are no consequences for violating the constitution, especially for those who are rich and in powerful political spaces. These are people who can afford, even after being found guilty, can create these, they instantly become sick and need to be admitted in some ICU. And somehow they are able to navigate the corridors of courts and find themselves out. So it's only the poor who are punished. The poor and the privileged go scot-free. So I think the moment there is no consequences for violating the constitution for those who are politically and financially privileged, then this is why now nobody cares. Let me go back to the point of devolution because it's very important.
Okay.
It's very unfortunate that county governments have not lived to the object of devolution as contained in the Constitution 2010. We all know that they are not getting enough. The 400 billion that they are getting is a drop in the ocean. But even the little that's going to the counties, what do they do with it? It's purely mismanaged. If you look at the procurement system, they're not followed. It's open secret that governors and MCAs are running proxy companies to do bidding with the public. And that's why they cannot hold, even when funds have been lost. Nobody cares. How many Auditor General's reports have been released since the advent of devolution? And the reports keep on pointing to the same thing: collusion, political interference. What do you expect the county assembly to do if, yes, the executive is messing, but half of the problems are also pointing to the county executive members who are making fake mileage claims, who are making fake benchmarking trips, and these kind of things. So this collusion and conflict of interest in public procurement will not allow effective use of public resources. As much as we advocate for increased resource allocation to the devolved units, we must also ensure that there are proper checks and balances, so that whatever little goes to the counties are also properly accounted for.
Yes, Idamas, your hand is up. Yes,
there's some developments that have been going on in the corridors of justice, and this has to do with unexplained assets. So the EACC and the DPP have been recovering certain funds from individuals, and increasingly in the last 2 years there has been an increase in these funds that have been recovered. However, how do we ratchet that up to ensure that if I have an X amount of money and I cannot explain, then also that reveals a criminal pattern, and that can be actioned on to ensure that I am nowhere near any leadership position? But otherwise, we have seen a lot of recoveries that have been going on in the last, I would say, 3 to 4 years.
Yeah. But not commensurate with what's taken off from the public covers, is it?
In fact, so how do we scale that up to cover the areas that we're really concerned about, especially devolution and public service? Yeah.
Yes, Grace.
Yeah. Just a quick one on that point. You know, the sad thing is that Kenyans, our children and our grandchildren and their grandchildren are going to be paying forever debts that have been borrowed, monies that have been borrowed, but have gone into corruption and into people's pockets. If our children and their children were paying for enhanced governance, for proper infrastructure, growth and development in the country, it would make a difference. But now, ask yourself, what are we seeing as key wins from the government? We have tried, and that's why 19% of Kenyans are, 19% of Kenyans here. It's only 19% of Kenyans who are saying, things could look like they could be on the right trajectory. So what about the rest of the Kenyans? You can imagine the pain Kenyans have, because we struggle day and night to create wealth, but to come to your pocket for you to enrich yourself and your children. We really must hold these leaders to account. They have to go through investigations. And remember, even if it's not in this time when they're still in power, there's a day they will leave power. And they will be held to account for the economic crimes that they continue to mete out on Kenyans.
So let's sample the feedback. The hashtag on X is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. The first one coming from Engineer Lazaro. He says, institutions tasked with the responsibility of oversight have become major letdowns. We are suffering from overrepresentation and duplication of duties among rival institutions. The 2010 Constitution requires an urgent review. Sam Masik _ says Kenya's greatest undoing is the quality of leadership and personnel appointed to critical institutions. They are politically favored, corrupt, and lack integrity. They operate at the whims of their political masters, often at the expense of ordinary Kenyans. Bob Otieno Owino says the alliance between President William Ruto and Raila Odinga is a major scam. In reality, the so-called broad-based government exists only to serve the political interests of a few individuals, while ordinary Kenyans are left to fend for themselves. MC _ says our constitution guarantees freedom of expression and freedom of association. However, the government is increasingly muzzling dissenting voices. Abductions and extrajudicial killings have become the norm. There is a glaring lack of accountability, no regard for meritocracy, and widespread corruption. Sir Nixon Ndugura says, unfortunately, the civil society has grown increasingly silent and lacks the vibrancy it once had, as if it's under state capture. Without transparency, honesty, and accountability within civil society itself, championing social justice becomes an uphill task. Cornelius, final comments, is it so?
My parting shot is that we must reclaim our sovereign power. As much as the Constitution provides that this power can be accessed indirectly through our democratically elected institutions, it's time now, because now it's clearly demonstrated that the people we have entrusted with sovereign power have failed us. Kenyans must now organize, mobilize, and claim our sovereign authority and take charge of the destiny of this country. That will be properly exercised. As we move towards 2027 election, Kenyans must reflect and make a resolute decision to put in a government in place that's going to adhere to the tenets of the Constitution. So if not that, then this country is headed to a very, very difficult.
You're not under state capture?
Right? Definitely.
Are you under state capture?
We are not under state capture. Okay. Civil society has been able to do what it can do within the limits. Of course, you know, largely this work is done with the goodwill of our development partners.
Okay.
And sometimes we are curtailed in resources, but we've done the best. These reports we've issued, this is the third report we are issuing under this regime, and it clearly points what Kenyans must do. I think we just need Kenyans to rally behind civil society and to ensure that we are able to put this government to check.
Yes, Demas.
Last year, we got to a point in terms of national discussions And we go to a point where, I remember, I think it was Senator Kirigo Thangwa, who made a reflection about all these funds that we have. We say that we want to educate our children. We have CDF under the governor, CDF under the MPs, CDF under other things. How can we consolidate all these things for serious service delivery to our people? The crisis that's going on is one of civic space and also economic prospects of Kenyans. The dignity of Kenyans is affected by their lack of access to proper education, which affects your prospects, your future prospects, lack of health care, and so on and so forth. So how do we now use government funds to return dignity to the people? And how do we return agency to our people so that they can freely express themselves without being encumbered?
Okay, yes, Grace.
Civil society last year faced a lot of acrimony, a lot of intimidation, surveillance, and pressure from government, and has been for many years on end. We remain committed to our mandates, and we have continuously provided updates to the Kenyan people in regards to what is happening. We have continuously provided data on number of persons who've been disappeared, extrajudicial killings. We have monitored and we keep documenting, we keep providing evidence, and we are ready to partner with every agency that is responsible to ensure the protection and safeguarding of the Kenyan people. We do want to urge Kenyans that we work together, one, to reclaim our power and ensure that we hold our leaders to account, but also we put in the right people into those seats. Really, the power is in our hands. We have, and I know there are lots of issues around voter buying, around rigging and all that. But we can choose to put people in place and ensure that the systems work. Thirdly, we want to ensure that people speak out. And so the protection to the right of expression, the right to association, the right to picketing, Kenyans, these are our rights provided for in the Constitution.
Okay.
We have to keep questioning things that are not going well. We have to keep expressing ourselves in whichever way, because that is provided for. And we need to stop the executive from muzzling and stifling people's voices, because our most important weapon is our voice. So we have to keep using our voice to call out it.
Are you as vibrant as before, as pointed out in the feedback?
I think vibrancy is dependent on a couple of things. I will say that at the moment, the human rights sector is very vibrant. We have seen a lot of vibrancy within the women's rights sector, for example, the food security sector. I guess what is happening is we may not have been as visible as probably we would want to be, but we also need to reflect upon ourselves.
Okay.
We are leaders that have also agreed and told ourselves we need to listen more and we need to reflect. But as Cornelius here said, we are also really dependent on goodwill of many different players to be able to, to live up to our expected mandates. And so we keep on calling development partners, we keep on calling Kenyans of goodwill, work with us to ensure that we can deliver. If you look at, for example, the evidence that we preserve,
yes, it's
expensive. It is expensive to ensure that we can demonstrate that person X was killed through a police bullet, and this weapon was in the hands of so and so.
Thank you.
It needs a collaboration of different players. So we are vibrant and we'll keep doing what we promised Kenyans that we will do, because civil society is a key player in the sector.
Thank you. Much appreciated. Grace Wangeshi is the Executive Director, the Independent Medical and Legal Unit, IMLU. Cornelius Oduor is the Deputy Executive Director, the Kenya Human Rights Commission. Demas Kiprono holds the same position at ICJ Kenya. A short while, we had Suba Churchill, the Executive Director, the Kenya National Civil Society Center, who joined us from the county of Homa Bay. Thanks to you too for waking up with us here on the broadcast. The hashtag on X as ever is Citizen Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikad. Up next is health and lifestyle. Thanks for watching. Good morning.